ride.
Want a lift?
Hey! Okay, dude, let's see what that jalopy can do!
What's a jalopy?
First off the line.
Yeah, I'm sure they're feeling pretty silly right now.
Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to Megas Month. So, this episode, The Return, is kind of has a double meaning, as it both means the return of Magnanimous, who kind of comes back. I'll kind of, well, not really explain, but I'll kind of point that out in a minute. And also, this episode is just a reference to the fact that the main plot of the episode and the thing that is the inciting incident that causes Coop to just kind of be out and about at a time that Magnanimous shows up again is what we find out is that Coop actually has a video late from the video store and has to go to actually return it, and that's what causes him to actually kind of be in the middle of the road while Magnanimous just kind of shows up with his robots and stuff, and sure enough, the episode opens up with Coop and Jamie and Kiva watching a movie, Bugra, which according to Coop and Jamie, they've watched 8 times this weekend, and of course Kiva is very much very disinterested in the movie because she literally points out that they've done all of that, and B, she's seen the movie 8 times now, so she's not particularly excited about it at all. But of course, Coop just points out that it's an all-time classic, and he loves it to death. And but then he asks what day it is, and of course Jamie claims that it's Wednesday, but Kiva then points out that it's actually Sunday, with Jamie looking very confused because he apparently didn't know what day it was. And it's at this point where Coop realizes that the video is actually due back at the video store later that day, and he only has about a half an hour to go and return the video because he waited so long. So he quickly realizes he actually needs to go get over to the video store immediately, and then proceeds to scoop up the video, and then Jamie and Kiva all get into Megas and proceed to get ready to go to the video store when out of nowhere, a robot named T-Bot, who I should mention is very much a play on Mr. T, and it's a very fun antagonist. T-Bot then proceeds to show up out of nowhere and declares that he's going to actually take down Coop, and of course, T-Bot talks very much like Mr. T. So a lot of his stuff is a lot of the lines he says are a lot of rhyming and a lot of really be like, I am the best that ever was kind of attitude. But of course, Coop has no idea why he's there or why he's getting in his way, and remarks that T-Bot must be from New York or something, and proceeds to scoop past him despite T-Bot's protests, and It does very much try to scoop past him to get to the video store, but then Magnanimous suddenly shows up and then proceeds to actually tell Coop that he needs that he should just kind of ask him if he remembers him, and of course Coop and Jamie both very much remember him but can't get his name right, and of course Kiva is the only one who actually remembers his name, and Magnanimous is very happy about the fact that she remembers him, and of course, it's at this point where they actually explain how Magnanimous is back, except not really like at all. As established at the end of his original debut episode, Magnanimous was sucked into a quantum singularity and just kind of disappeared. So and notably, he has a scar now, which he didn't have before, but it doesn't really explain what happened to him. It doesn't. The episode kind of just yadas over that point. It's just like, how did you get back? And then Magnanimous responds, it wasn't easy. So of course, Kiva then asks the very interesting question of why the hell Magnanimous is even there at all. And it's at this point where Magnanimous reveals the exact reason why he's there. He's the one who brought T-Bot with him, and he goes on to explain to Coop that he, as the defending champion, he has to now defend his title against the Galactic Combat Federation that Magnanimous runs, and of course Coop is very confused as to how exactly that's even any of his business. pointing out that he's late on a video and needs to go deliver it, but also points out that he doesn't really want to actually fight against Magnanimous. And sure enough, Kiva and Jamie then also proceed to talk Coop out of it, pointing out that even though Magnanimous points out that he's more than willing to make cut the Coop a deal on the ad revenue for the show and streaming rights, and also make him an action figure. Kiva and Jamie both point out, although Jamie more reluctantly because he admittedly doesn't like Kiva very much, although they are technically friends now, but the two of them then proceed to point out that that Magnanimous has tricked Coop before and has openly tried to actually do things to him that were kind of unsportsmanlike, and in addition to trying to kill Kiva and Jamie as well. And of course Coop even does also add to that when Magnanimous brings it up, pointing out that of course it wasn't a fair fight to begin with. Coop points out that he is in fact the reigning champ, even though Magnanimous kind of did cheat a little bit, and Magnanimous of course denies this, pointing out that it was a completely fair and clean fight, even though we know it wasn't. And Jamie even points out that it wasn't, pointing out that all of the traps they set up were specifically designed to make Megas take a fall, and of course Megas ultimately didn't, but of course Coop is very much quick to point out that he doesn't really trust Magnanimous, and Magnanimous does point out that Coop does kind of owe him a little bit for destroying his stadium and kind of ruining his reputation and a whole bunch of other things. But of course Coop then also points out that he doesn't really owe him anything, pointing out very, very cleanly that Magnanimous once again that Magnanimous cheated, and also that he ultimately became reigning champion and because of it, even if he did wind up losing, he did wind up destroying the stadium in the process. And also concerning the fact that Magnanimous is a bit of a sleazy bastard, he does point out that he doesn't really owe him anything, and proceeds to try and walk off and go to the video store. But Magnanimous, as one last trick up his sleeve, then proceeds to announce on live television that Coop's championship status is now revoked, which causes Coop to become very upset. And of course, Magnanimous then proceeds to gloat, pointing out that he's no longer able to actually be the champion anymore because of what, as Jamie puts it, managerial upset. And of course, since Magnanimous is the one who ultimately calls the shots and makes the rules with the GCNN, he does point out that there's really not going to be any real thing he can do about it except fight back and defend his title. And of course, Kiva then points out that Coop should just drop it and just walk away, pointing out that it's literally just a title and that there's no real point to defending it. But of course, Coop then proceeds to point out that being a champion without a title is a very big deal for him. And what we find out is that we do see all the various things he is indeed good at, which isn't much, but it does mean a lot to Coop. He remembers all of his competitive eating competitions, all of his competitive gaming competitions that he's been in, all of his roadshow competitions, and all of his just his card competitions and all the other things that he's good at. And he just kind of thinks that if he winds up losing this one belt that he won, he is going to eventually slip and lose all of his titles to everybody else around him. And deciding that isn't what he wants, he then proceeds to declare that he is indeed champion, and then proceeds to point out that Magnanimous can't really do anything about that because the belt is currently in his house, and points out that as long as Coop still has the belt, he is still very much champion. And this, of course, causes Magnanimous to come up with a bit of a brain idea, where he realizes that if they attack the house, that if he sends bots to attack the house and take the belt, then whoever gets the belt will indeed become champion. And then proceeds to summon several other robots, which aren't on the wiki. Interestingly enough, I did Google their names a little bit, but they aren't apparently on the wiki, which is interesting. But of course, Coop then proceeds to. He then proceeds to sick all of his robots on the house, with of course T-Bot leading the charge, and of course T-Bot is our main antagonist because he's currently the one that's leading everything, and is the only one that's actually voiced. So yeah, he's kind of the only really important antagonist, so he's the only one I'm going to picture. But of course, Jamie then proceeds to point out the very obvious problem, and that is that they're going to go trash his house, and of course, Coop immediately has a panic attack because what he quickly remembers is that his mom is home, and if she winds up surviving the onslaught, she'll likely kill him if something happens to the house. So of course this gives Coop more than enough incentive to actually fight back against the robots and defend his title, and also while Magnanimous actually announces everything on screen to all of the people across the galaxy, and as everything and also throughout all of this, all the various aliens that it's broadcast to wind up betting big on the current reigning champion, because obviously Coop is very big. Coop is obviously the reigning champion, and now he needs to defend his title. And everybody is very much like, oh, this is going to be a fight for the ages. I very much am going to have to invest in that and see how this turns out. And sure enough, it winds up turning out exactly how you expect. It winds up being a 6-way tag for the belt, where Coop winds up fighting off against T-Bot as well as the other robots that Magnanimous brought with him. And of course, at several points it does result in the house being nearly destroyed. But of course, Coop continues to keep facing off against the various champions, and it does wind up being a bit of a problem, because of course Coop is putting Megas through its stresses. He's very much putting Megas through the ringer to actually defend his title. But eventually, I mean, I'm not gonna picture. I mean, I can't. There's a limit to how much I can review, because obviously there's a lot of fighting in this episode, and there's not a whole lot of dialogue. But of course, but I should mention, throughout all of this, Magnanimous is just a really fun character. Again, he's one of the more fun villains in the series. Obviously he's voiced by Bruce Campbell, who has a very narratory voice, and of course is a very big person that way. But also he's just fun, because in addition to just being this big narrator type person, he also just makes a lot of references to a lot of Bruce Campbell's old movies. And case in point, there is one toward the end of the episode that I will get to, even though I can't find it. But in case Coop does actually wind up fighting against the various robots, who at one point actually tag team in and try to fight Coop that way. But and also throughout this sequence, there's a really funny running gag where every time Coop gets knocked around by a villain, there will actually be a sign that says that'll just reference the fact that Coop needs to actually pay up his thing, or pay a late fee. And the main thread throughout this episode as well is that Coop does need. I'm going to talk about this instead of the actual tournament itself, because I didn't bring it up. But Coop needs to pay his late fee in time, or there's a very good chance he could lose his membership. That's the main risk of him having to fight all these villains now. And of course, this does wind up being a problem, because if Coop loses his membership, he'll have to go to the regular video store, and they don't have any of the cool stuff. So of course Coop is very much in a point where if he doesn't beat these robots quickly and doesn't get his video to the video store on time, it could be a very big problem. He has to do that. But eventually, Coop does wind up winning his title away from all the other robots. At one point, being able to with T-Bot being the final threat that Coop has to eventually take down, and winds up taking his belt from it. And Coop then proceeds to proclaim his victory as champion. And Magnanimous points out that is a very good point, that Coop is indeed champion, and also remarks that he seems to be out of fighters. But which of course winds up being a very big thing. Until Coop accidentally puts out an open challenge to the rest of the galaxy, because Magnanimous is actually streaming to the rest of the galaxy, and because of that, literally everybody wants a piece of Coop. So and of course, Kiva and Jamie then proceed to scold Coop for that, pointing out that he needs to learn to start thinking before he says something, and Jamie points out that he probably never will. But of course, this causes a large group of enemies to suddenly show up and completely surround Coop and Megas. And it's at this point where Coop actually goes into his signature trash talk, where he starts pointing out about how they all showed up, jumped him, tried to take his title as champ, and also are making him seriously late on his video. But before he can actually finish his trash talk, T-Bot actually winds up getting up and punching him in the face, and proceeds to point out that T-Bot wins no matter what. But this causes Coop to actually finally become openly upset about this whole fact, and eventually gets up and just starts fighting off against the robots. But and of course all the other giant creatures that have showed up to actually punch Coop. But the problem with this is that Coop is actually fighting an uphill battle because he's sustaining a lot of damage. And although he is holding himself against all the other robots and all the other people that are there, Coop is ultimately fighting an uphill battle because the sustained damage to Megas is causing internal problems and structural damage, and it's getting to the point where Megas is not going to be able to eventually fight back against any of the other robots. And of course, as all of this is happening, Magnanimous is actually watching the whole thing, and then eventually declares that now it's time to expose Coop to the main event. And of course, Coop does eventually take down all of the robots and is able to actually fight back against all of them, even though Megas starts actually leaking fuel at one point because of the sustained damage. And it's this point where Magnanimous actually shows up and decides to actually finish off Coop himself. And sure enough, he shows up in a giant robot that looks exactly like Elvis Presley, because again, that is a very big reference to that's actually a reference to how Magnanimous got cast in the first place, because I've mentioned this before, but they went to Bruce Campbell's airing of Bubba Hotep and went to a Q&A there and begged him to be on the show, and that's reflected in this mech's design because Bruce Campbell plays Elvis in Bubba Hotep. That's his main role in that movie. So yeah, the fact that this episode just kind of brings that full circle by having Magnanimous show up in a giant robot that resembles Elvis Presley and keeps going, "Thank you very much." But Magnanimous then proceeds to show up and then reveals why he's actually having everybody fight. And of course, Magnanimous has actually put out an open challenge for everybody to actually fight. But of course, Magnanimous then reveals what his true motivation is, which is revenge. And Kiva is the first to figure it out. But Magnanimous then proceeds to point out that because Coop ruined his reputation, destroyed his stadium, and a bunch of other things that he did when they last faced off, Magnanimous has now developed a deep hatred of Coop and also a nasty twitch in his left eye. And because of that, he wants to actually destroy Coop and his home planet as retaliation for destroying all of his other things. And Jamie then proceeds to point out that obviously Magnanimous offered a large cash reward to all these guys, which of course Jamie points out probably doesn't exist. And I didn't mention this, but Magnanimous does indeed offer a cash reward for everybody to take down Coop. And of course this winds up being the main motivation for why everybody shows up, both because of Coop's open challenge and also because of the cash prize Magnanimous offered. And of course, Coop quickly realizes, Jamie quickly realizes that was all a farce and that was just an excuse to soften Coop up so that Magnanimous could take him out personally. And sure enough, Magnanimous in his giant robot, which has a chainsaw for a hand, I should mention, then proceeds to fight with his Elvis bot, and he and Coop kind of exchange blows a little bit, but it's very clear that Magnanimous has the upper hand. And at one point, he actually cuts T-Bot in half, who recovers from the beatdown he got earlier, and only for Magnanimous to comically cut him down because he's in his way, and then proceeds to actually finish this assault on Coop. But as he's about to finish Megas off, Coop immediately reaches into Magnanimous's cockpit and grabs, because the cockpit it's kind of just exposed on the front of the mech, and of course Coop takes full advantage of that and just kind of grabs it and rips it out, and then proceeds to rip out Magnanimous and hold him in front of him. And with that Magnanimous defeated, Jamie then suggests that they squash him like the little bug he is, but it's at this point where Coop actually suggests that they have a very different idea, and then makes Magnanimous confess in front of everybody that there is indeed no cash prize, and that he lied to everybody. And of course Magnanimous isn't able to actually squirm away from that because Coop outright openly says that to everybody else that's there. And B, Magnanimous doesn't really deny the fact that it's not true, but also points out that he just needs to call his backers, and that he'll have the cash prize no problem. But of course, nobody actually believes Magnanimous at this point, and Magnanimous kind of tries to just swerve away and tries to get away from all of them, and and as he's trying to run away from the other robots, he then points out that Coop hasn't seen the last of him, and that he will eventually return and finish Coop off once and for all. And then proceeds to create a portal for him to disappear through, while the other robots and monsters and kaiju, including T-Bot, who somehow survived being cut in half and is currently just dragging his upper torso through the mud and all the other things. They all show up, and with T-Bot declaring as he disappears that he's never felt such an indignation, and he's going to finish him off, and then proceeds to just leave. But and of course Coop is now very satisfied about the fact that he successfully defended his title as champion, and of course Akiva then points out the very obvious fact that he destroyed basically the entire city to do it. And yeah, this is of course Coop has had a lot of more destructive stuff, but I think this is one of the more widespread things, because obviously Magnanimous just kind of jumped him with a bunch of robots and a bunch of other things, and Coop just kind of had to do a lot of collateral damage that he didn't mean to do, and all of this would have been prevented if Magnanimous had never shown up. So yeah, of course. Of course, Coop is very proud about the fact that he's actually successfully defended his title. But then JB points out that Coop still has to return his video, and they find out that it's like 5:28, and they have like 2 minutes to return it. So Coop literally returns it with like seconds to spare. But of course, because he actually did return it on time, there was no late fee. And Coop is very proud about the fact that he successfully returned it, and he's able to keep his membership, and then wonders what they actually could wind up renting next. And of course, Kiva then sarcastically remarks that they rent the movie again, and so that they can watch Bug Rough for a 9th time, which Jamie and Coop, ironically and much to her chagrin, are actually excited about, because that's actually a personal record for them. They've never watched the movie 9 times in a single weekend. So of course they immediately re-rent the video, even though the pullout shot at the end of the episode reveals that the video store was one of the places actually destroyed in the carnage, and they then proceed to bring it home to Coop's basement and proceed to rewatch the video again, with Karasha, one of the robots from earlier, just kind of being destroyed outside of Coop's house, and just kind of watching the video with him because he can't move, and I do find that kind of funny, but yeah, in any case, this episode was just a lot of fun. So basically, this episode just kind of is an excuse to return Magnanimous, who of course does a couple of sleazy things to actually get Coop in a position where he can destroy him for revenge. And of course, that's Magnanimous's main thing throughout the episode. He wants to soften Coop up with all of the other robots that he's brought, and on the premise that he's rebuilding his empire and is trying to rebuild his networking and other things. Well, in actuality, he just wants to destroy Coop for destroying everything he owned. So yeah, in any case, it is an interesting episode. I do like seeing Magnanimous again. I don't think he ever comes. The problem is that he never comes back, because obviously the show got canceled. But I would have loved to have seen him again. He was a fun villain, and I am a little bit disappointed that he only ever shows up like once a season and then never comes back. But he is a very fun villain, and I hope one day, if the series comes back, and if Bruce Campbell is actually still up to it, because he's a little bit older now, so I'm not entirely sure if he would still be willing to do it. But of course, if they can get Bruce Campbell to come back and reprise the role for the reboot that is eventually going to happen, because they have admitted to wanting to do a reboot that for reasons is getting in the way. I'll get into that in like the final episode or so when I go to actually finish the series. But yeah, this episode is. But yeah, Magnanimous is just a fun villain, and I like seeing him again. And it is very fun. And it is very fun that he just kind of destroys the town casually while trying to destroy Coop for revenge, and also trying to get Coop's belt back, which and of course there is a deeper reason for that, whereas Magnanimous would have been able to destroy Coop and get his championship belt back, and become champion himself, which I'm not entirely sure how that would have worked out for Magnanimous, considering he would have painted a target on his own back. But yeah, I did like Magnanimous as a villain in this one. It's fun that he came back and did some stuff, and yeah, I just kind of like that. But in any case, that's my review of Megas XLR. What you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that are my way saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out what's linked in the end screen for you guys. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom link is actually the link to Courage Month, the previous one of these that I did. So if you want to absolutely see that, again, the link is on the end screen. Go check that out and go watch it, because I put a lot of work into that one, and it is one of my personal favorites I've done. I am probably going to do a lot more of these in the coming years, but yeah, go check that out. The link is on the end screen, and thank you very much for continuing to support Megas Month. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!